other than ethics or ethics, say, and a belief in God, why does it matter if I'm a Baha'i, a Hindu, a Christian, a Muslim? I believe in God, I strive to be a good person, and will accept even the social teachings, for example, of the Baha'i faith. So what here is the problem? This is a rather rich topic, and there's so many things to go into. I've done my best to try to bring some seminal core concepts to bear on this, so I'm going to do my best. Baha'is themselves often promote this concept, and these are derived from certain quotes. For example, in the vignettes of Abdu'l-Baha, it says,
Abdu'l-Baha was asked, "What is a Baha'i?" He replied, "To be a Baha'i simply means to love all the world, to love humanity and try to serve it, to work for universal peace and universal brotherhood."
Or for example, from Abdu'l-Baha in London,
"It makes no difference whether you have ever heard of Baha'u'llah or not. The man who lives the life according to the teachings of Baha'u'llah is already a Baha'i."
Now, of course, I think it's important to really try and empathize with this issue because obviously ethics are central to a Baha'i life, and I would argue central to every single world religion we know of. That bereft of the individual and social transformation, religion no longer becomes that remedy that actually, if you will, is to make a heaven on earth, to actually create a reflection of the divine world in this world. So I don't want to brush off. Now, this issue has been discussed and debated within Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Zoroastrianism, and every faith I know where there's this, if you will, tension between the ethical life and the acknowledgement of the divine revelation. I want here just to look at a couple quotes from the Baha'i writings, which really stress the vital importance of ethics and goodness and nobility within the revelations of God. This first is from the Promulgation of Universal Peace by Abdu'l-Baha.
"If religion proves to be the source of hatred, enmity, and contention, if it becomes the cause of warfare and strife, and influences men to kill each other, its absence is preferable. For that which is productive of hatred amongst the people is rejected by God, and that which establishes fellowship is beloved and sanctioned by Him. Religion and divine teachings are like unto a remedy. A remedy must produce the condition of health. If it occasions sickness, it is wiser and better to have no remedy whatever."
So this and many other quotes within the Baha'i corpus give this concept that religion is supposed to be a remedy both for the individual soul and for the body politic. If it then becomes an engine driving towards hatred and strife and violence, then it is no longer a remedy and then shall be put aside. For example, Baha'u'llah in the Book of Certitude.
"And yet, is not the object of every revelation to effect a transformation in the whole character of mankind, a transformation that shall manifest itself both outwardly and inwardly, that shall affect both its inner life and external conditions? For if the character of mankind be not changed, the futility of God's universal manifestations would be apparent."
It would demonstrate the futility of God's universal manifestations if a transformation in the whole character of mankind was not reflected outwardly and inwardly. Or, for example, in the selections of writings of Abdu'l-Baha,
"The most vital duty in this day is to purify your characters, to correct your manners, and improve your conduct. Inasmuch as the purpose of the manifestation of God and the dawning of the limitless lights of the invisible is to educate the souls of men and refine the character of every living man. Unless these divine bestowals be revealed from the inner self of humankind, the bounty of the manifestation will prove barren, and the dazzling rays of the Sun of Truth will have no effect whatever."
So if you have a large believing populace, or I should say, to a certain degree, pseudo-believing populace, who actually pays lip service to the teachings of Jesus Christ. And yet those qualities, those attributes, those perfections that were spoken of by His Holiness Jesus Christ are not manifest upon the plane of history and in one's own individual life, then that fruit is barren. Or if you will, that tree is barren of fruit. There is no revelation that I know of that is not enjoined upon its disciples, its adherents, the faithful, to express the qualities of the sacred court, to reflect those divine attributes into this world. And I myself can be a very poor example of this at times. Yet it is the purpose of our existence, one of those purposes, one of those expressions, to reflect out those divine attributes and qualities, the principles of love, of charity, of compassion, of justice, of mercy. So at no point in this entire presentation would I ever want to diminish the vital and central aspect of one becoming a vessel for the teachings of God, for becoming that willy, if you will, a hollow reed that is played like a flute by the divine court. That said, I believe that if we were to boil this down into its essence, while this is an utterly vital, completely important and fundamental principle, it does not take into account the expanse of a human existence, our own nature, and what is decreed by the great religions of the world to be the purpose of human existence. It is part of it, but it is not the whole picture. I believe that at its apex, the concept of religion, which is religio, to rebind, to reconnect, is to bind ourselves once again, to rejoin ourselves with God, with each other, and with our own true selves. So with that said, I want to look from the Baha'i corpus. We see in the opening of the Most Holy Book, one of the central texts of the Baha'i revelation, a quote. Now, even if you don't agree at this point, let's do our best to understand what is being said. You may not agree all the way to the end of this presentation. I only hope that we can at least come to an understanding that the perspective where the purpose, an ultimate purpose, is to be a good person, is a different conception of the purpose of existence than that of the great world religions, be it Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. They all have an addition to that. This is Baha'u'llah from the Most Holy Book.
The first duty prescribed by God for His servants is the recognition of Him who is the dayspring of His revelation and the fountain of His laws, who representeth the Godhead in both the kingdom of His cause and the world of creation. Whoso achieveth this duty hath attained unto all good, and whoso is deprived thereof hath gone astray, though he be the author of every righteous deed. It behoveth everyone who reacheth this most sublime station, this summit of transcendent glory, to observe every ordinance of Him who is the desire of the world. These twin duties are inseparable. Neither is acceptable without the other. Thus hath it been decreed by Him who is the source of divine inspiration.
So one who has recognized the manifestation of God for their time has attained all good, achieved the most sublime station, a summit of transcendent glory. Whereas, and note, it says the author of every righteous deed, who has not recognized the day spring of His revelation, has gone astray. Now, both duties are actually inseparable, but the first duty enables them to attain unto all goodness. The other, the second duty, and let's know what that is. It is to, if you will quote again, it says, everyone who reacheth this most sublime station, the summit of transcendent glory, to observe every ordinance of Him who is the desire of the world. So while they're both inseparable, acceptance of the manifestation of God is the first duty. The second is obedience. And let's note that obedience from a Baha'i perspective, and I would say from an Islamic perspective and a Buddhist perspective and a Hindu perspective, is that one is to take on, if you will, the remedy of the divine physician, his laws and his teachings, which include his administration, for example, in the Baha'i writings, the Universal House of Justice, the National Spiritual Assemblies, local assemblies, the enjoining of the 19-day feast, holy day observance. Many of these individual personal expressions like fasting and our obligatory prayers, our readings in the mornings and evening, our meditation, our studying the faith, and yes, our rectitude of conduct. But as we shall see, these are all the remedies offered by the divine physician, so that, as might be expected by some, one part of this will be, well, we're defining good in this context as these group of individual expressions of like honesty and compassion and justice and mercy, which are absolutely and completely vital. But as we shall see, one, the remedy given by the divine physicians, a title for the manifestations of God in the Baha'i revelation, includes a large array of, if you will, vitamins and prescriptions that are to make the body politic as a whole healthy and vibrant and carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. Now, I do want to note that there is one quote from Abdu'l-Baha, and this actually comes from Some Answered Questions. It is chapter 65, the explanation of a verse in the Kitab-i-Aqdas, which is the most holy book. So I want to read it, and it's going to keep coming up conceptually. The question:
It is said in the Kitab-i-Aqdas, "Whoso is deprived thereof hath gone astray, though he be the author of every righteous deed." What is the meaning of this verse? Answer: This blessed verse means that the foundation of success and salvation is the knowledge of God, and that the results of the knowledge of God are the good actions, which are the fruits of faith. If man has not this knowledge, he will be separated from God, and when this separation exists, good actions have not complete effect. This verse does not mean that the souls separated from God are equal, whether they perform good or bad actions. It signifies only that the foundation is to know God, and the good actions result from this knowledge. Nevertheless, it is certain that between the good, the sinners, and the wicked who are veiled from God, there is a difference. For the veiled one who has good principles and character deserves the pardon of God, while he who is a sinner and has had bad qualities and character is deprived of the bounties and blessings of God. Herein lies the difference. Therefore, the blessed verse means that good actions alone, without the knowledge of God, cannot be the cause of eternal salvation, everlasting success, and prosperity, and entrance into the kingdom of God.
That, as we find, or as I find in every religion I know of, virtues without the knowledge of God is not enough. Now, of course, there is a difference between, as Abdu'l-Baha said, this verse does not mean the souls separated from God are equal whether they perform good or bad actions. There is no doubt that an individual who's trying to serve their community, trying to be a good person, despite having, say, not accepted or rejected the manifestations of God, is actually carrying forward civilization. That they cannot be seen as equal unto a profoundly wicked human being.
Question: Those who are blessed with good actions and universal benevolence, who have praiseworthy characteristics, who act with love and kindness towards all creatures, who care for the poor, and who strive to establish universal peace, what need have they of the divine teachings, of which they think indeed that they are independent? What is the condition of these people? Answer: Know that such actions, such efforts, and such words are praiseworthy and approved, and are the glory of humanity. But these actions alone are not sufficient. They are a body of the great loveliness, but without the spirit. No, that which is the cause of everlasting life, eternal honor, universal enlightenment, real salvation and prosperity is, first of all, the knowledge of God.
I'm doing this on the one hand for Baha'i friends to make clear that when we look at the twin duties in the opening of the Most Holy Book, and then we actually look at Abdu'l-Baha's commentary on that, of course, there is a spectrum of how individuals are treated according to their deeds, even when they fall outside the pale of one who has recognized the day spring of revelation for their day. And it's important to note that there is an actual difference. Secondly, it is very, very common in my interactions with peoples of other faiths that there is a misunderstanding of the Baha'i position on this, that really we're just talking about being good. No, it is absolutely vital to recognize the manifestation of God. But here we come to something, and I do want to address this. There are underlying principles here that kind of come up, if you will, throughout the conversation that you have. One is that at times when I have these conversations, many conversations, there is an underlying, if you will, presupposition or assumption, and it kind of goes like this. Given that religion is false, why can't I just be a good person? Okay. So there's this often unstated assumption, well, we can't really prove this anyway. They're not real. They're not true. Therefore, why can't I just be a good person? And I do think, we're going to come back to this, but I do think there's a very different perspective when we take into question truth claims. For example, if you say, well, it's true that the divine has manifested itself upon the plane of history and given its expression of the remedy for the great ills of the individual and the body politic to gather us all into one, if you will, united community serving to carry forward an ever-advancing civilization, and seeks a relationship and a connection with us, this being our creator. But why can't I just be a good person? It sounds very different. It sounds like something's being missed, or they're not quite grasping the first part of that series of statements. So one is that there is this underlying premise of the falsity. Like, these are just traditions. That is not obviously the position of a Baha'i or a Muslim or a Christian or a Buddhist or a Hindu. The other is this concept of heaven and hell. Now, I've done an entire series of videos on perspectives of the afterlife in the Baha'i writings, and this concept of the absolute nature of heaven and hell. And this often underlies it as well, because it's like, well, if I don't accept the manifestation of God, but I strive to be a good person and serve my fellow man, why would God condemn me to an existence of eternal separation and or torture? And this is a legitimate issue, and one that is often brushed off by individuals of different dispensations. And by dispensations, I mean, for example, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism. To me, these are dispensations, if you will, outpourings of the self-disclosure of God, the expression of the sacred into this world. So there's an underlying assumption which makes the issue seem pretty intense, because there's this idea that, well, just because, I try to live a good life and in the end, I didn't accept this individual as being the mouthpiece of God, and therefore I'm condemned to either eternal torture or eternal separation. It's a legitimate concern. Now, one we're going to have to address, but I do please ask for a better understanding of this. Some of the issues will come up, but for a better understanding of this, I have a whole section on the afterlife in the Baha'i writings. We're going to look at something first, and it's, if you will, we're going to look at certain aspects of humankind and our nature and our role in this world and how they begin to diverge, and then they're actually going to come back together. So, stated simply, there is a difference between ethics and intellect. Because someone can be very lovely and absolutely lost intellectually. Now, before I jump into this, I want to read a couple quotes. This is Baha'u'llah from Prayers and Meditations.
The purpose of God in creating man has been, and will ever be, to enable him to know his Creator and to attain his presence. To this most excellent aim, this supreme objective, all the heavenly books and the divinely revealed and weighty scriptures unequivocally bear witness. Therefore, an enlightened man of wisdom should primarily speak with words as mild as milk, that the children of men may be nurtured and edified thereby, and may attain the ultimate goal of human existence, which is the station of true understanding and nobility.
So understanding reality is separate from ethics. Here we have again Baha'u'llah in the Book of Certitude.
What oppression is more grievous than that a soul seeking the truth, and wishing to attain unto the knowledge of God, should know not where to go for it, and from whom to seek it?
So the main purpose here is to look at, okay, well, in these quotes, what is Baha'u'llah saying is the purpose of human existence? To enable him to know his Creator and attain his presence. This supreme objective, all the heavenly books and the divinely revealed and weighty scriptures testify into this. So, the ultimate goal of human existence, the station of true understanding and nobility. Now, this is interesting to me. When I was first investigating the Baha'i faith, so I had come to a belief in the existence of God, and I'd come to a concept that perhaps the divine, the sacred, had actually communicated itself, revealed itself on the plane of human history. When I ended up meeting Baha'is, I was intrigued by some of the claims of the Baha'i faith, some of its central teachings, the remedies, if you will, from the divine physician. And I ended up in a conversation one night with a dear friend of mine, Mark. And I asked this question to my friend Mark. I said, why are you religious? And it was very interesting. He turned to me and he said, well, I want to be sane. And whether or not that rings with you at this moment in your life, it deeply did at that moment in mine. Why? I wanted to be a good person. Leaving my hometown, I wanted to try to become, if you will, a gentleman and a scholar. And I was very, very, very far from it. I had a very dark past, but I wanted to try and be noble. Still trying. Yet there was another facet. It wasn't just the ethical, it was the intellect. I wanted to understand reality as it is. What's really going on in this world? What is the purpose of human existence? What has been the role of humankind in this world? Has the sacred communicated? And that, if you will, was the intellectual. I wanted to, if you will, pierce the veils of delusion and illusion and try my best to see the way the world really was, whether or not I could live up to that, which again, I'm still trying and struggling with. So it's really interesting. We can be lovely and lost. We can be decent people and completely delusional. And imagine you're sitting there to, if you will, to highlight this. I love learning. I love science. I love history. I love pretty much all of academia. Imagine someone comes up, and you're sitting there talking to them, and say you're in biology. So you're sharing your ideas about the biological world, whether it's zoology or Darwinian theory and the development of the species. And you're sharing these ideas with this person, and then turn to you and they say, well, why does it matter? Why can't I just be a good person? Imagine likewise, maybe you're a physicist, maybe you're a historian, right? Maybe you're a geologist, maybe you're into astronomy, and you're sharing what you know about the world, and the person turns to you and says, well, why can't I just be a good person? It seems like we're in two separate conversations. He would say, like, well, of course you can just be a good person, but understanding reality and having a clear picture of what this all is seems in many ways to diverge purely from the ethical. If you see someone come up and they tell you that your creator, the ultimate cause of reality, has invited you to a deeper standing of this reality, the reality enshrined within your own self, reality enshrined within your fellow brothers and sisters, and your relationship with the divine world, and you say, why can't I just be a good person? All I'm trying to establish here is that it's a very, very different worldview. Because I could say, well, you can, that's up to you. Because of course, you could imagine you have a child, and your child is very dutiful. You know, my son Eli is a good soul. He's kind, he's caring, he's respectful to people, say he's honest, right? And he's compassionate. But that lovely boy, not true obviously, also thinks that leprechauns fought in World War I. Now, he is good, but he also lives in a delusion. His character is lovely, but he's lost. Now we're going to see how this wraps back in and these actually converge again in the future. But again, if all of a sudden we have someone express what it is that the divine religions say that they're doing. The divine sacred has embodied itself in this world, has sought to rebind and rejoin itself with humankind, and to rejoin the body politic, and explain to us the nature of this reality and those beyond. Their response, why can't I just be a good person, is a strange one. There's a very similar question that often comes up. And it suggests the same sort of underlying assumptions. And I've been asked by many, many people. They'll say to me, well, why do you need religion? And this gets to the heart of the matter as well. They'll say, well, why do you need to be religious? Like, why do you need religion, Rob? And many, many times I've said, why do you need koala bears? Why do you need octopuses? Why do you need stars? And usually this is a confusing response. They'll say, well, what do you mean? Well, I don't need koala bears. I don't need octopuses. I don't need other galaxies or stars or comets. They're just there. They're real. So why am I saying this? Because, as I said, this principle of the assumption that it's false, to ask me why I need religion assumes that there is some unfilled need within me that I need to actually grab onto something that I think is false. But I don't. So the question of why would I need religion is already assuming in many ways that it's a falsity or a weakness. The ethical and the intellect seem to diverge. It's interesting when you look at this because the question itself, why can't I just be a good person, is itself an intellectual objection. Not at this point, an ethical objection. We'll see how it kind of comes around after. Now, because in the end, it is often put forward in a concern about the social implications of exclusivistic beliefs, right? That other people can't be saved. Or, if you will, the implications of an erroneous belief. So there is, ironically, as we'll see, there is in this question sort of an assumption that the person they're talking to, hey, well, why can't I just be a good person? They believe that that person in front of them is in many ways lovely but lost. And that potentially their belief, say in Judaism or Buddhism or Hinduism, is, they're still a lovely person, but they're deluded, lovely but lost, in intellectual and ethical divergence. But there often is this assumption and actually a true understanding that people's beliefs flow out into the world and can have that negative implications. So, but the objection, at least on the surface, is an intellectual objection, not an ethical one, at least how it's stated. It's saying, well, why can't I just be a good person? You have an erroneous understanding of reality because all that matters is the ethical. So it's interesting that it's actually bound up in the same problem. Now, if religious beliefs, of course, have ethical implications, then they aren't separate, which, of course, they're not. There's a central concept within the Baha'i writings called progressive revelation. There is an evolution of the ethical, and that this comes from the divine physicians, the manifestations of God, or the divine gardeners, the manifestations of God. That they prescribe a remedy for the individual and for the body politic. And inherent in this concept of progressive revelation, the ethical evolves us and with us, meeting us but carrying us forward. Often, the Baha'i writings are misunderstood because it will say that religious truth is relative, not absolute. This is often horridly misunderstood. It's believed that, well, it's just all relativism. It's just a relativistic notion of religion. No, it's that the full disclosure and the full expression of the divine world has not and never will be unfolded unto humankind. We're not capable of understanding it. But that unfolding of the divine message, this self-disclosure of God unto humankind, is over time according to our ability to grasp it. And that this includes the unfolding of the ethical principles of the divine physicians unto humankind. It's something that, again, is often misunderstood. I will speak for myself and my understanding of the Baha'i writings, which I'm always doing at any time when I'm speaking on this channel. I don't believe that Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, or Hinduism are the remedy that we need for this day. That is far from what I believe. The Baha'i position, if you are a Christian, for example, is very similar to how Christians understand the Tanakh, the Hebrew scriptures, which they call the Old Testament. They might believe their origins are divine, but they do not desire for or wish that the injunctions within, for example, Exodus, Numbers, Joshua, etc., are actually the social laws and expressions of God's will for this day. I don't believe that Christianity, while I believe Jesus Christ is the Word of God, the Divine Sophia, if you look at my other presentations, the teachings and the social structures of Christianity, like how Christians see Judaism, is not what is meant to be the expression for the planet at this time. So, to be a good person in this concept is not in what I've heard many times in conversations, was like, well, why can't I be a good person? And someone's like, well, what do you mean by good? And they mean like, well, where are you deriving your ethics from? Or how do you define justice? Or how do you define compassion? Or how do you define love or charity? All these get fleshed out, for example, within the life and teachings of Jesus Christ, within the life and teachings of the Buddha, and yet they shift or expand over time to address the needs. the very nature of the Bible is a progressive revelation. Islam and any Muslim also believes this. And I likewise, while to me Islam is a divine revelation, that revelation is not what is needed for today. And at times, each of these dispensations can have rules and regulations that can actually be detrimental, because the remedy of yesterday is not the remedy for today. To be a good person cannot be separated from these remedies offered. So I'm not just talking about being truthful. There is a whole expression within the Baha'i writings, for example, of how to run elections. There's electoral teachings, there's economic teachings, there's things about global governance, there's things about local governance. So good can't be separated from these remedies offered by the divine physicians. This doesn't mean you can't be courteous or kind or compassionate. Rather, it means that you can act at cross purposes to the revelation of God unto humankind, or refuse to apply it. So we can either oppose or refuse to apply it, which withholds the remedy from humankind. I want to read a couple quotes here. The first is from Baha'u'llah in the Epistle of the Son of the Wolf.
The divine messengers have been sent down, and their books were revealed, for the purpose of promoting the knowledge of God, and of furthering unity and fellowship amongst men. The purpose of religion as revealed from the heaven of God's holy will is to establish unity and concord amongst the peoples of the world. All men have been created to carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. The revelation of Baha'u'llah, whose supreme mission is none other but the achievement of this organic and spiritual unity of the whole body of nations.
So at this point, what am I trying to bring to bear? There is an idea. Why can't I just be a good person? That concept is vital. The concept of being a virtuous individual, striving to be noble. Yet at the same time, that is separate and different from whether or not your picture of the world is true. That is why when I asked this Baha'i at the time, well, why are you religious? And he said, I want to be sane. It actually struck me very deeply, because he was getting at something that I really wanted to understand. I wanted to have a perspective of the world that accorded with reality. I could have gone along in my life being kind and compassionate, honest, merciful, affectionate, generous, and at the same time I could have been lovely but lost. Yet at the same time, while there is this divergence of the ethical and the intellectual, they reconverge. Because what we believe about the world and what we believe about humankind brings out and informs and influences all our conceptions of global governance, of economics, how we're to treat our fellow man, how we should run governments, what public policies should be. If we have a delusional conception of reality, then we will be working at cross purposes to what is true. This becomes even more important when we look at the prescription, the remedy of the divine physician. If I came and it's like, look, everybody here is deeply sick. We actually have a problem. There's actually an epidemic going on. These people all have infections. Now I need to get these medicine to these people and try to deal with some of the symptoms while we get everybody back to health. And you said, well, why can't I just be a good person? You're missing the conversation.